What is your major problem, Cameron, with the way that women heroes are depicted today, and how can that be improved?
Great
Well,
question.
I think it comes down to the fact that they're not being that the journey that we're talking about, the feminine journey, is inherently being rejected because, and I'm going to make some more controversial comments, so forgive me, right? But these are the comments, right? These are my opinions, and interpret them as you will. Take out what's of value them. So I think we're at a stage of not even third wave feminism, we're at a place of fourth wave feminism, which has in some ways gone full circle, in my opinion, to the point that we are at a point where a woman is no longer defined in any way, right? That's what I think fourth wave feminism is. One could argue in a critique of the feminist stages, one could argue that phase one is all about getting basic rights like voting, right, and property rights. Okay, stage two is about the legal rights, and then stage two is becoming a person, like stage one, becoming a legal person. Number two, okay, I want to be equal to men. I want to be able to be the CEO too, right? That's arguably phase two. Stage three, arguably, I think is, at least the critics of it would suggest that it's more about reversing, or it's about reversing the injustices of those previous stages. And then as a result, perhaps exalting women over men as a means of correcting the injustices of centuries and millennia, right? And a critic would say it's all about giving female dominance, right? And then stage four, which I think is really about 10 or 15 years old, maybe, or at least entered academia in a very serious way at that point. Phase four feminism, I think, is really about what is a woman, right? We've had that argument that the very attributes that we use to define the feminine are inherently oppressive. So we're at this intersectional place, which lops into the current trans conversation, right? Which really wasn't happening in the earlier stages. And so now, because you had transvestites, that was the term that was used before. Now the term is transgender because the meaning has changed because gender is changing in its meaning, right? Or at least the way it's being used, the words is being used. So with that said, because we've entered this fourth wave where the very attributes of the feminine are seen as constructs of the traditional feminine, right? Are seen as social constructs and not inherent to the human condition. As a result, there's been a stripping away of the feminine journey. In all these earlier stages that we had, there were female heroes. I mean, you go back to silent films, in the 1920s, before women could, 1910s, before women could even vote, right? World nationwide in the United States, right? There were silent film stars, right? I'm writing a script right now about Alana Azimova, a Broadway star who became a huge silent film star in the late 1910s. And she's now forgotten, but she was a revolutionary artist, right? And she became the richest woman in Hollywood before she could have the right to vote. I mean, it's quite remarkable, right? And so you have that stage, and then in the different stages, you had even in the 60s, second wave feminism, you had the Emma Peels, right? The Avengers, right? You had these and then you had the Bionic Womans and the Wonder Womans of the 70s, right? And leading into Ripley, as you talked about, and all the great female heroes, the 80s, and so. All the way up to, the Terminator, and Linda and all of that. And so then and that was celebrating. And what was interesting is you can see an evolutionary change. I think I'll use the example of the evolutionary change of what we saw with the character in Terminator, where she starts off in a traditionally feminine role. She's a waitress, and a lot of that movie is her running and being protected by this futuristic soldier from this mindless machine that's trying to kill her, right? And by the end, she crushes it, right? She smashes it when she's going through the labyrinth of the factory, yes. Right? And she smashes it and whatever, and she realizes that her destiny is to be the mother of this future savior of humanity. And how do we see her in the next movie? Linda Hamilton. First thing we see her is, in her asylum with she's got better muscles than most men do, right? And she's kicking ass. Yeah, she was tough. So we've already seen a change where now I think that's a turn. That's a turning point, Terminator 1 to Terminator 2, where we're switching from second stage feminism to third wave feminism. Now she's more physically stronger than men, and she makes a spiel in that movie about how men suck, right? She makes a spiel. Yeah. Her son, rolls his eyes. Mom, it's not about sex. It's not. Can we be constructive here? She's like, men like you. Yeah, the men like you that you don't know how to create life and you create only death. Now we're entering third wave, right? But even then, she's she's still feminine. She's a mother.
She's maternal.
She's embracing that role, right? And so those characters are interesting because I think men were still fine with those characters, right? Because and they kind of laughed off like, yeah, we all men kind of suck, but it's okay. Because she hasn't fully. She's still a woman, or a traditional feminine, a woman in the sense of a protective mother, right? Because those definitions are still there. Now, in the last 10 years, with the rise of intersectionalism and this new wave of feminism, where the very idea of a woman is challenged, that you can be have male genitalia and say that you are a woman and have access to female spaces because there's no difference, right? That's the argument where we are, or at least where we were until maybe about a year ago. And so with that, Hollywood's portrayal of women moved away from giving women any attributes. The example we'll use of an actress I love who was in a horrible situation is Daisy Ridley in the Star Wars. Wonderful actress. She lights up the screen. I've seen her in other films. She's quite good. She was just given a garbage script in these terrible movies, right? And yes, I see some discussion of that. These are terrible movies, in my opinion. These are terrible movies. And The Last Jedi is the worst movie of all time. It's the worst movie ever made. It's literally the worst movie ever made. I mean, Plan 9 from Outer Space is a better movie because there's heart and love in it, right? I mean, and so
that counts.
I mean, there is. Yeah, Ed Wood loved. He just wasn't a good filmmaker, but he loved what he was doing. Whereas, to try Mr. Johnson and the people involved in The Last Jedi loved destroying what they were doing, and they knew what they were doing, right? They were intentionally destroying it. And so, but her character, from even in J.J. Abrams' early effort with The Force Awakens, there's nothing there, right? She's in no way feminine. Her body type and suit, there are no curves are allowed to be seen. She never changes her costume in all these movies. She's still wearing the same. Over all these years, she's got only one pair of clothes. This like shapeless, tunic, right? Whereas go back to Leia, who we meet Leia. First thing we meet Leia is Darth Vader. Only you would be so bold. This dude who we just saw crush some guy with his bare hand, crush his throat. And he's like 2 feet taller than her, and she's like, Darth Vader, screw you. That's a friend. And then she's firing laser guns and whatever. I mean, this chick is cool, but then she's hot. She's like wearing flowing dresses. I mean, she's beautiful. None of those movies. I mean, ultimately in Return of the Jedi, she's wearing the gold bikini. They show her curves. That's embraced, right? Whereas poor Daisy Ridley, who's a lovely woman, is essentially neutered into having no gender identity at all of any kind. So as a result, she has no personality. She's not given that. The actress has personality. The character wasn't given it. And so no one could identify with it. I mean, I think that's a deeper issue beyond, people complaining, Rey was superpowered and all that. That's the external issue. The internal issue was she had no identity. She was not, it wasn't even non-binary. She was non-unitary. There was nothing there. It was a stick figure that you could male, female, pointless person, no personality with superpowers. No one could identify with that because we're still human beings in a body, whether, even in the modern world where we're talking about trans and all this, there's still a concept of the energy, when someone becomes a trans woman, they're changing from one energy to another energy, right? So, okay. So we are identified with some kind of energy, masculine or feminine within ourselves. This character is not being given anything. And as a result, there is no humanity. It's literally become like the Terminator. It's a robot, right? And that's what they did to female characters. By taking away any polarization at all, it took away any empathy for them and any human connection. And it broke storytelling because we need each other, male and female, masculine and feminine, right? We need these polarities. If you go down to a big zero, as someone was mentioning, I think it was Sable in the comments was talking about Taoism and the yin and the yang. The Tao, the ultimate reality, you can call it God, you can call it the Tao, but the infinite reality is the first line of the Tao Te Ching is that the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao, right? Okay. So if you can define it, it's not ultimate reality. But since all we can deal with is what is definable, we'll never know the Tao. What we can know is the next stage, which is the yin yang symbol, which is when the Tao takes a polarized reality. Right. And the genius of the yin yang symbol inherent in it, this is 10,000 years old.
Ancient,
the genius of symbol is that it's not white and black. It's white with a black dot and black with a white dot because the feminine has the seed of the masculine and the masculine has the seed of the feminine. That's 10,000-year-old symbolism that we understood. Right. And so that is the first level of being, of consciousness, of awareness, of I and thou. You know, to have any awareness at all, you must be aware of something, right? And to be aware of something outside yourself, there must be a boundary. And then that creates polarity, that creates masculine, feminine, it creates charges, you know. And so that's the only way. And I say that as a Sufi mystic. I say, you know, the Sufis say that union, when you achieve union with God, which is called fana fi Allah, which literally, you know, it's like what Buddhists would call nirvana, or Christians would call, you know, becoming one with Christ, right?
Salvation.
You know, yeah, or just what Christ says in the Gospels, especially the Gospel of John. I'm one with the Father, and you and the disciples. I am in the Father, and you are in me. Right? I'm paraphrasing, but that's the idea. So the idea is to become one within Christ. Right? Okay? And so the idea is then to lose your individual identity. Well, the Sufis explore that, and that is the goal, but that's not the final goal. Fana fi Allah is halfway there. So fana, which is absorption into the Tao, to the infinite, is halfway there. Because you have to go in there to experience reality, which is beyond binary, which is beyond masculine, feminine. It is beyond subject and object. It's beyond those things. It's pure unity. But then you have to return to the world of duality, which is called baka, which is the next stage. This is the next stage of the spiritual journey. Union with God is not the final stage. The next stage is to take the lesson of that into the world of duality and live it. Right.
Right. Is the thinking behind that? Kind of like if your only relationship is with God, you're kind of cut off from the practical expression of it, kind of.
Yeah. Well, and the Sufis say, if you experience fana, if you experience annihilation within the divine, you won't remember it, so you will never know. Because going back to what we said about memory and the labyrinth, right? It's going back. Everything comes full circle. Going back, memory. Memory is an effort to recreate. Right, through imagination and experience. But if you experience beyond experience, there's nothing to recreate. So you'll come out of it never having known you were there, because you won't remember it.
It's impossible to remember.
Because memory is a recreation. Memory is an effort it's a remembering. It's putting back together pieces. But once you've experienced the infinite, there's no pieces. So there's nothing to put back together.
And one thing you actually just mentioned it that I always kept in mind was you said I and thou. And that, to me, just that title denotes the relationship. You know, it's great if I attain this great thing, but if I have no relationship with other people, if there's nothing happening in that in-between space where the relationship occurs, then it's all almost for naught. You've just it's like a space monkey. You're just out there and you're floating in space to some extent. And
you have the Hindu sages will tell these stories, and I should probably wind down in a minute. The Hindu sages will tell these stories of the wise, the wise fakir, the wise sage who escapes the world and goes to the mountain for 30 years and meditates and achieves, unity with the Atman, nirvana, whatever term you want to use. And he achieves oneness. And then he comes back down to the village after 30 years of being alone in the mountain and achieving oneness. And the moment he's down there, within 5 seconds, he's annoyed with the obnoxious people in the street. Some guy almost runs over the cart. He starts shouting at the guy. So he's brought nothing back with him. He's just gone right back, right? So there's no change in his character. So he never experienced it. He didn't, the change of people saying, well, you've never experienced duality. If you come back to duality, you haven't experienced it. I don't want to get into that mystical debate. The point of the return is that you come back changed, so that your behavior, you start treating others as one with you naturally, because you've experienced it. You may not remember it, but suddenly, instead of that person who comes up to you and slaps you in the face, instead of seeing them as your adversary, your automatic reaction, having experienced oneness, is to see them as you. So how can you be angry at them? If you're being slapped in the face, you're doing it to yourself. So why are you doing it? What's the experience about, right? Why are you slapping yourself in the face? Why are you doing this to yourself? That's not something that you naturally go to. Once you experience unity, you come back charged that way, so you treat the world differently, right? Which is the journey. It's that's and the final thing I say, it goes right back to the controversial comment about the Gospel of Thomas. It's coming out of the labyrinth into the light.
Yeah, well, and I think that's amazing commentary. First off, and you got me thinking again about the idea of the relationship. What good is change if you can't apply it anywhere? It's like knowing and not doing is equal to not knowing. That phrase I've heard before. So if you do attain something, knowledge, it's not just you've learned something. You should be able to.
And you're changed. You're changed.
Yes.
And this is the last thing I'll say, because then I have to go. And that brings us back to your wonderful book, because what you've done is you've shown us the change happens in both the masculine and feminine journeys. The masculine journey of the hero's journey the change, it's internal, but it's mostly external. You come back, bringing back wisdom to others, right? Bringing back the jewel, the boot, right? But here, the feminine journey, as you navigate the labyrinth, right? What is changing is you. The labyrinth is not necessarily changing. The external environments of relationships aren't necessarily changing. You are changing, and then you relate to the labyrinth in a different way, right?